Safe Communities Committee, Scrutiny Committee of 2023. I hope you all had a pleasant Christmas and New Year. Just before we start, we do have a little bit of housekeeping to do. May I remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet and this recording archive for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen on screen or use the raise hand function? Also, could you please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording? The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues to the chairman or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has any difficulty hearing or being heard or seen when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chairman or Democratic Officer know. Thank you. Okay, so this is the meeting of Monday, 9th of January 2023. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any?
I've not had any through formally, Chair, unless members have any apologies they wish to add.
No, no hands, nothing. Okay. Agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of December 2022. I am happy with these. Has anybody got anything they would like to say about these minutes? Any adjustments need making or etc.? Okay, is everybody happy to go ahead with those minutes? Yeah.
Happy
Okay.
to accept, Chair.
All right, thank you. Agenda item 3 is the declarations of interest. Do we have any? No. Okay, and agenda item 4 then is Stop Loan Sharks Wales presentation. If you'd like to go ahead, please, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mark, shall I put my presentation on share screen or are you able to do that?
Entirely up to you, Liz. If you want to do it, that's fine, or I can share the screen. There's no problem.
Okay, well, next challenge.
Right, that's come up, Liz, so hopefully members can see that.
Has it come up as a slideshow or?
Not yet.
No,
I think you've
hang
got
on
it.
Yeah,
that's
we're
it.
there now. We're in business.
Yeah.
Excellent. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much, everybody. As I mentioned just now, I'm at the tail end of a cold, which means I'm making a really horrible croaking noise. It's not at all painful for me, but I do appreciate it's quite painful for you to listen to. So my apologies for the quality of my voice. What I'm hoping to do is to give a short introduction to Stop Loan Sharks Wales for the benefit of new councillors. So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour through who we are, what we do, and why it's relevant to you. And then I'm going to give an update into what's happened with us in the 12 months since I last spoke to the committee. And I'm well aware that you have time constraints, but obviously I'm very happy to take any questions depending on the time available. So we were formerly known as the Wales Illegal Money Lending Unit, and we were established in 2008, funded by the UK government to investigate and prosecute loan sharks throughout the whole of Wales. That's all 22 local authorities. We were initially hosted by Cardiff Council, but when shared regulatory services came into being, we moved into SRS and are now hosted by the Vale. So we are locally very relevant to you, but perhaps uniquely within the Vale, we actually have a remit throughout the whole of Wales. The unit is in two parts. There are investigators who look at gathering sufficient evidence for a successful prosecution of a loan shark. Currently, all our investigators are ex-police officers, and they have the skill set that you would expect. We have a surveillance expert, we have two financial investigators, and more than one of our investigators are specially trained in dealing with vulnerable adults, which, as I go on to speak, you'll realise is particularly relevant. My own role is client liaison officer, and there are three of us embedded in the unit. And you can think of us as a sort of inbuilt victim support service, because the nature of this crime of loan sharking is that the victims tend to be particularly vulnerable. So when the unit was established, it was decided that unless there was specialist support focused on the victims of the crime, actually prosecutions were highly unlikely to be successful. The three of us client liaison officers also combine that role of victim support with awareness raising and training. And again, before I finish, I'll bring that back to its relevance to you in your roles. Just for clarity, I should say this is the definition of a loan shark. It's quite a dry statutory definition. A loan shark is anyone lending money as a business without the necessary authorization from the Financial Conduct Authority. That can look very dry, but it's actually a crucial distinction. Loan sharks are not payday lenders or doorstep lenders. Those are companies which can be regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority and are therefore legal. What we deal with are generally individuals or small groups of people who are lending money without authorities from the FCA. And what that means is that there is no regulation and there are no rules. So the crime is lending money without an authorization, but it means there are highly likely to be additional crimes. We prosecute, in addition to illegal money lending, we prosecute individuals for assault, for criminal damage, for blackmail, for kidnap, for various other offences which loan sharks commit in order to enforce their loans. They can't go down the legal route because they are illegal, so they won't take debtors to court to recover the money. They will use a range of techniques from bullying and intimidation through to extremely serious crime, which can extend to sexual offences, including rape. Loan sharks, these are typical characteristics. Is a loan shark likely to give paperwork in relation to the loan? No, highly unlikely. The interest rates are likely to be exorbitant because there are no rules. So we have prosecuted loan sharks charging hundreds of thousands of percentage interest rates. As I say, there are no rules. I've already mentioned the enforcement techniques, and regrettably, loan sharks are highly likely to target vulnerable individuals. Frankly, it makes their business model easier, and they see vulnerability as a factor which is going to make someone more likely to borrow from a loan shark. People living with vulnerabilities, we will usually start from the position of a vulnerability including poverty. And this brings it right home to the cost of living issue, which of course we're all very preoccupied with. Sadly, it's likely to be a boom time for loan sharks at the moment. Poverty is the obvious vulnerability, but there are many forms of vulnerability. Loan sharks will actively target people living with disabilities. They may well target people from minority ethnic groups, because those people may not be familiar with the legal system in the UK. And also people who struggle with reading and writing. Those are people who are highly unlikely to expect documents. So that's what I'd like you to just bear in mind, that where there is vulnerability plus poverty, loan sharks are likely to be circling, as it were. Business models is in speech marks. What I'm getting at here is, how do loan sharks find their victims? Yes, there is some online illegal lending, and increasingly our investigators are looking at that. It's fair to say, though, that in Wales at the present time, loan sharking has remained a much more localized crime involving individuals and word of mouth. I've put friends in speech marks there. It will be a false friend who lends money informally, but that is very typically how a victim will describe the lender. Oh, it's someone my ex-husband used to play darts with. He was a mate. Or it's my nephew's ex-partner. There'll be those sorts of relationships. Word of mouth, I have already mentioned. You'll see those categories there. Pub bouncers, they could be seen as a friendly person to speak to. Faith group, we've prosecuted loan sharks active within faith groups, within occupational groups such as taxi drivers. A loan shark who targeted women that she chatted to at the school gate. So these are false friendships, which then give rise to exploitation. We find increasingly that the word grooming can be helpful here. You would hear it more often in the context of a sexual crime, but actually it's very prevalent in these sorts of economic crimes. So it's friendship in speech marks, moving on towards exploitation. And on this point, it's worth mentioning that loan sharks who you see on the screen, on TV or in film, are usually big, aggressive-looking males. We investigate and then prosecute many female loan sharks. It's sadly a very female-friendly crime, and it's almost difficult to believe. But I was working with one of our investigators this morning. He is investigating an 82-year-old female loan shark. They come in all shapes and sizes and ethnicities. So the stereotype very much needs to be challenged there. I've included in these slides a sort of snapshot of a case study. These are all typical characteristics of loan sharks. This was the stereotypical large, aggressive male loan shark. He bullied his victims into handing over post office cards and pins. We had a substantial cash seizure when our search warrant was executed. And as most of our loan sharks do, he pleaded guilty. I'm not going to comment on the state of his conscience, but I think it was clear that his legal team would have told him the evidence against him was overwhelming. He therefore pleaded guilty, short term of imprisonment. Again, that's at the court's discretion, not ours. But you will see that under the Proceeds of Crime Act, our financial investigators were able to satisfy the judge that this man should lose over £91,000 of his ill-gotten gains. And the Proceeds of Crime Act really is one of our most powerful weapons. We hit these people where it hurts. Prison sentences get you the headlines. Proceeds of crime, I think, possibly has a bigger impact. The way that those funds are used, again, is not within our control. We will assist the victims to apply for compensation. It's not our decision, but in this particular case, the judge made substantial awards to the victims, sums of £20,000 plus, which, as I say, it's not our decision, but we're very, very happy to support those applications. So, looking at what's happened in Wales during 2022, we had 16 incidents reported. That means more than just vague information. I'm not an investigator, but these are all technical definitions. 4 of those were then upgraded to active investigations. 1 has resulted in the offender being cautioned, and we have 1 prosecution decision pending. We are also currently involved in a major investigation with trading standards concerning other offences, during which it's come to light that illegal lending is taking place. Now, it shouldn't technically come as a 2022 matter, but one of our cases from a few years back also came up for sentencing in October 2022. And as a matter of interest, you might want to Google search Clayton Rumbelow, a loan shark from Llanelli. It got a lot of media coverage, including in The Sun, because the case came to light because of the very extravagant lifestyle that Mr. Rumbelow was leading. He was sentenced to 10 months in prison, suspended for 12 months. As I say, it's not technically a 2022 matter, but it's a pretty interesting case if you want to look at that. Within the SRS area last year, it's difficult for me to go into too much detail here because these are active matters, but I can share with you that we investigated the situation of a vulnerable female in Tremorfa in Cardiff. It was a relatively technical matter as to whether the lender there was unauthorized or not, and that's a matter that's still being looked at by my colleagues. We received welcome information from South Wales Police of a loan shark being active in the Vale of Glamorgan. The police are very happy to cooperate with us. Frankly, we take from them some of their work, so we relieve them of some of their burden. I'm looking at my colleague's notes. A number of victims of that alleged loan shark have been identified, and there are several of them particularly vulnerable. Interviews are likely to take place with those individuals within the next few weeks. Within Cardiff, then, we are looking at 2 loan sharks said to be active in the Ely area. And we also received information from our colleagues in Birmingham who run our equivalent, the English team, and they are looking into some online transactions, and we have a likely suspect in both Cardiff and another in Llantwit Major. So those are all ongoing inquiries. So as I say, that I'm giving you sketchy details for reasons that those operations are active. We also then embarked on a relaunch, and hence why we are now Stop Loan Sharks Wales rather than Wales Illegal Money Lending Unit. We felt we went back to the drawing board. What do? We stop loan sharks. Let's call ourselves Stop Loan Sharks Wales. So there was a refresh and an update, a real push to get the word out there about what we do on social media. And we've changed the emphasis. I'll give you the website link in my final slide. You'll see that instead of saying, as we used to, report a loan shark, we took the view that that's actually quite intimidating. It feels like quite a scary step to take. And so instead, we've changed the terminology to tell us about it. In other words, you may not know whether this is a loan shark. You may not want to actually engage with that label, but if there's some lending activity that's giving rise to concern, talk to us, tell us about it. So we're very, very pleased with that website. It was launched in October, so we're still reaping the benefits there and feeling that we are getting a lot more engagement. There is also some research. The Centre for Social Justice produced a report in March 2022. Now, this report was based purely on English evidence, but although there are differences between the 4 nations in terms of lending, there is also a lot that we have in common. And the standout figure there was the estimate that within England, there are over 1 million users of illegal money lending, of loan sharks. And obviously, that's a deeply depressing figure. That research, bear in mind, came out in March. The cost of living situation has obviously deteriorated substantially since then. As part of our relaunch, we thought we were having so much work carried out looking into the nature of loan sharking in Wales and how best to identify the demographics we should target, that we approached Welsh Government, and they were very happy for us to fund the same organisation, Strategic Research and Insight, to conduct some actual reported research, which we can produce as evidence. And that's relates purely to Wales. And we are planning that will be launched next week. It was a really good opportunity for us to engage with the Welsh Government tackling poverty agenda. We work closely with Welsh Government in their goals and targets relating to tackling poverty. The third bit of research, it's an organisation called Fair for All Finance, and they are going to produce the first bit of research looking at loan sharking in in fact, not Northern Ireland, in Scotland, England and Wales. The first substantial piece of research for approximately 12 years. They have picked 2 areas of England to focus on, Preston and Croydon, part of Glasgow, and for their Welsh area, they picked Port Talbot. And we've had some feedback from the researchers, but we are, all of us across the three nations, going to be extremely interested to see what Fair for All Finance produce when they report next year. So finally, this is my hard sell. We need you to engage with us. As I said, tell us about it. Any suspected loan shark activity, we usually feel the best way to get hold of us is using our 24-hour hotline. Firstly, because it's 24 hours. So if the problem becomes acute on a Saturday afternoon, we're there to pick up the phone. Secondly, because you get through to one of us in the unit. We're a small team, we take it in turns to hold the loan shark phone, and you would get through to one of us to discuss the problem. It's very much talk to us, discuss with us, not a simple report it and have done with it. We can work with you. More broadly, engage with us in terms of raising awareness. We offer free training. It's part of our core remit, and it's part of my role and my colleagues' roles to engage with various groups to raise awareness of the problem. It's very much a hidden crime. There are factors such as fear, shame, ignorance, all sorts of factors. And the more we can raise awareness of the problem, the better it will be. After my presentation to this meeting 12 months ago, I was able to carry out in-depth training with 21 members of the Vale of Glamorgan Housing Department and 48 people from Cardiff and the Vale Citizens Advice. So as far as we're concerned, bring it on. We're here to spread the word with your assistance. And I think my final slide, obviously, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd. And I think those are all the contact details, which I've hopefully transcribed correctly. I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm very, very happy to take questions so far as time permits for you.
Thank you very much for that. Very informative. I can see we do have 3 people wanting to ask questions. The first person will be Councillor Carroll.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that very informative presentation. It was really insightful and very useful, and I'm sure we'll all go on to share this information and help you in your efforts to tackle this. It's a question really in regard to the way loan sharks operate, because it's not something that I've ever really discussed before, to be honest, and I'm sure it will be something that will be the case for many other members of the committee as well. I don't want you to talk about particular cases because I'm confident that there are ongoing investigations and nobody wants to do anything that would undermine those. I'm just conscious that there were 2 known loan sharks operating in the Ely area. Now, as the crow flies, that's just 5 minutes up the road from communities in the Vale of Glamorgan. So it's a more general question, really, as to the behaviour of loan sharks. Would they typically base themselves within one community and then focus their activities there? Or are they known to sort of have a much wider network than that, where they sort of go wherever the work is, for lack of a better phrase? Because that would help us to understand the risk of them moving from that community or indeed other places in Cardiff or RCT, Bridgend, etc., into the Vale.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And that's a very interesting question. Very broadly, loan sharks operate on their own territory.
Okay.
They rely on their reputation. It would be very unusual for a loan shark. I mean, obviously, they're not going to observe local authority boundaries.
Yeah, no.
But geography means a lot to them. So if you're the loan shark on a particular estate, you're not going to be lending outside that
Yep.
estate, or it's highly unlikely. Similarly, within villages and small towns, that's your patch.
Yeah.
They don't tend to travel very far. Off the top of my head, the furthest geographical distance I've worked on between a loan shark and victims, the loan shark lived in Church Village and was lending to some people in Merthyr.
Oh, that's
So
quite a distance then.
that's atypical.
Yeah.
Generally, an Ely loan shark will be lending in Ely,
Yeah.
a Barry loan shark will be lending in Barry, but there's always an exception.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, Councillor Hennessy, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Excellent presentation, Elizabeth. 2 questions. Do we know how many loan sharks are active in the Vale of Glamorgan at the present time? And the second one, and the second one is for the Chair, is it possible we can arrange for training as a committee?
I'll answer the first question. Is sadly we don't know. The nature of the crime is that it is very concealed. Victims are very frightened to speak about it. A typical threat from a loan shark would be, if you make any trouble, I'll burn your house down. And that keeps the problem very, very underground. In a former role, I was a debt advisor at Citizens Advice, and I never had a single client actually say, oh, and then there's my debt to a loan shark. You need to ask the questions that will give rise to the information. For example, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I know I worked with clients where maybe if I'd said, oh, your friend who helped you with your rent arrears, did she expect to get any money back on top of what she lent you? That would have been, but as I say, hindsight is a wonderful thing. And that's why the training that we offer will cover those topics so that people are much more confident eliciting the information. And I'm hoping the answer will be that training can be set up, but I won't speak for the chair.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Councillor Hennessy, if you'd like to lower your hand. We have 3 more people to speak. I believe the next person is Councillor Aviat.
Thank you, Chair. Elizabeth, I think I spoke to you in the last presentation. I've had experience of this. It was my ex-husband's family, my ex-mother-in-law, and the woman came. The loan shark came from quite an affluent area of Cardiff, and she visited Splot very regularly, and she used to ask the ex-mother-in-law to collect all the money from the people, and they were usually little old ladies, and you know, I think she gave her a little bit off her debt. But what she always used to, this, I'm going back in the 90s now, and what she used to do, obviously I couldn't say anything, you know, because she was like really revered in that house. They put the kettle on and they'd fuss and everything. But what she also used to do is bring some quite nice jewellery, proper stuff, proper jewellery, you know, proper gold at Christmas time. And she'd come out with a suitcase full of jewellery, and she'd try and flog that off at Christmas time. And obviously there was hefty interest on that as well. And I couldn't believe that a woman at that time. I couldn't believe a woman would be doing it. I had the same idea. I thought, oh, some big burly men, you know. And yeah, she was quite a well-to-do middle-class lady, and yeah, she'd thought nothing of it. And she was charging £100 for a £50 loan then in the 90s. So, you know, so I do know about it, and obviously I'm really glad that it's all coming to light now. The other thing I was going to say, Elizabeth, if people do identify them, could we do the same thing as we do with domestic abuse victims? Can we put alarms and stuff on the houses, or can we help them in that way to protect them?
Yes, and thank you for raising that, Councillor Aviat. That's a really important emphasis, is that the safety of the victims is paramount. We're not a blue light service, so if the danger is immediate, we will ask for police assistance. But if it's not an immediate threat to life, then we will very much look at safeguarding measures, and we might be talking CCTV. I've certainly, because of that horrible threat about burning houses down, fireproofing a letterbox very often will give peace of mind. And I've been involved in cases where we have, as a short-term measure, moved families into hotel or temporary accommodation just to get them out of the danger area short term. Relocation is a tricky one. Generally, people don't want to relocate. They want to be safe in their houses. Police markers will be put on those properties. And I can't emphasize enough that victim safety is paramount, because there's no point doing what we do if we're not keeping people safe. And that really brings us back to the reason why there are 3 of us looking at each case from the client, from the victim's perspective. So thank you for raising that point.
Thank you.
Councillor Lovelock Edwards.
I thought Councillor Perks was ahead of me.
According to the list I've
Oh,
got
it's me.
here, it's
Okay,
you, then
I'll
Councillor
happily
Perks,
take
then
that.
Buckley.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I want to echo the other councillors' comments with regards to the presentation. And sadly, like Councillor Aviette, I grew up in the valleys with personal experience of knowing a loan shark who tried to come across as this benevolent man, but clearly wasn't. The point I wanted to, or the question I wanted to put to you is, with the rise of in-work poverty, you know, starkly increasing in the number of people sort of struggling who actually work, are you looking to do some more work in the coming months with employers and employee organisations such as the Wales TUC or individual trade unions to sort of try and raise the profile and I suppose raise awareness so that employers can also perhaps understand any sort of red flags in terms of supporting colleagues and employees who may be suffering as a result? Thank you.
Thanks very much for raising that. At the moment, I'm particularly engaged in doing some work within the NHS sector for that very reason, the in-work poverty that you mentioned. And again, it's shocking, I suppose. Our colleagues in England prosecuted an NHS consultant who was an active loan shark within the hospital where he was a consultant. We have prosecuted a woman in a care home who was lending money extortionately to her colleagues. So we're well aware that this is a real problem. We have frankly struggled to engage with the trade unions in the way that we'd really like to. It's an ongoing issue, it's a challenge, has many priorities. And it's, if you like, it's an ongoing piece of work for us. If any of you do have direct contacts into exactly the sorts of groups you're talking about, I would be extremely grateful for those leads, because if you effectively cold call someone by email, there's a horrible tendency to go into their junk box or is that really interesting box. Whereas if one of you was able to say, hey guys, you need to know about this, that's a brilliant introduction for us. And I think I was meant to say, but didn't, that we've done some training for the community pantries in Bridgend, and I've got a meeting with Trussell Trust coming up the week after next, because cost of living, food banks, loan sharks, it's all part of a continuum. But the more referrals you're able to give me, councillors, through your own good offices, it'd be hugely appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I bring Councillor Perks in, I just want to say, Councillor Hennessy, I meant to say after your question that I will come back to this point about training once all questions have been asked. Councillor Perks, if you'd like to come in now.
Thank you. It was the cat that actually knocked my button off, so that's how I ended up lower down on this. But yeah,
sorry. I
no,
hadn't
that's
noticed
okay.
you had
That's
your hand
fine.
up earlier, otherwise I would have brought you in.
That's fine. I still
order
get
you were
to,
originally there.
I still get to speak, and that's fine. So, Elizabeth, what I wanted to ask you is whether you have sort of publicity literature, and whether you already have it in sort of public buildings, sort of like libraries, sort of on toilet door, back of toilet doors, things like that. Whether that is throughout the Vale of Glamorgan, or whether we need to look into, you know, sort of other areas within the Vale, businesses and stuff like that. Whether you have that budget to do that. And
yes, thank you very much, Councillor. We do. We have a limited physical capacity to do these things. As part of our relaunch, our leaflets and posters are currently being refreshed. But even though everything's all, you know, so much of what we do is online now, there is a real place for leaflets and posters, particularly among people who perhaps aren't very confident online. So I've certainly spent my Friday morning in an area of Newport sticking posters up physically. We can't cover the whole of Wales. Where, for example, we get information that there is a loan shark active in an area, and we haven't actually got a victim who's willing to speak to us, that would be a real reason for us to go into an area and do that. But there's absolutely no reason, once we've got our new materials, why we can't go into libraries, social landlord receptions, those sorts of areas. I even managed to get a poster up in a GP surgery on Friday, which is no mean feat, I can tell you. So yeah, we'll publicise wherever we possibly can. And again, if anyone's able to assist us, we'll drop the stuff off, we'll send it out, or whatever that might be, for your surgeries or whatever. Thank you.
That's okay. What I would also say is quite a few of the councillors are school governors as well.
Right.
And I'm sure you've spoken to schools and stuff like that, but with, you know, the ability to go to school governor meetings, it might be worth us highlighting your service again. My ward is, along with sort of Julie, it's one of the most deprived areas of Barry, that I sort of, where I'm the councillor there, but I'm also governor of 2 primary schools within the centre of Barry as well. So, you know, I'm sure that schools are aware of this, but if we can highlight it with the governors as well, it's and have publicity, then that might be a good thing.
Well, insofar as we've got the capacity, we'd be absolutely delighted to engage. I was invited to speak to the Ely and Keirai Learning Partnership a couple of months ago. They were very strict and they told me I had 10 minutes, but it was actually very, very productive. I gave out the key messages, and I'm now following up with various groups that I met at that meeting. So the busier I am within Vale of Glamorgan, the happier I will be, I think I can safely say.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Buckley, if you'd like to come in, thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Elizabeth, for the presentation. You've just answered the one question that I was going to ask. Thank you very much. A point for you, though, where you doing the letterbox fire guards and stuff, do you do that yourself, or is that via the local fire services?
We work in collaboration with fire and rescue on those sorts of issues, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was just going to suggest, I know they got domestic violence teams that do that type of work, and they might, even if they couldn't help you, they might be able to tell you what they're doing. But thank you for everything you're doing for our communities.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Buckley, if you'd like to lower your hand. Right, Councillor Hennessy and Elizabeth, a point about the training. I don't believe that it would be appropriate solely for this committee. I think this would be something that would benefit all councillors. and so that I would imagine that I will be having a chat with Mark later to see if that can be facilitated by Democratic Services. Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay. We have no other questions. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for your time today. You may leave and go and enjoy the rest of your evening, or if you wish, you can stick around and listen to the rest of the meeting. It is your choice, but thank you very much for your time. It's been very informative, as was last time.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure if we do want to arrange training, somebody will be in touch with you.
That's fantastic. Thank
Okay.
you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your interest, everybody. I'll hope to hear from many of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 5 is the cost of living support for food, warm spaces and other means of support. This went to Cabinet on the 15th of December 2022.
Good evening, Chair. I'll take that reference if that's okay with you. Good evening, committee. Thanks very much indeed for having me this evening. This builds on the presentation that Elizabeth was just giving you, and as Councillor Collins said, it's a reference from Cabinet. They're referring this report to yourselves as well as Corporate Resources and Performance Committee to do a couple of things. One, just to raise your awareness of the range of different support that is underway by the Council and our partners, and also then specifically to draw your attention as a committee to an Audit Wales report and our proposed response to gain your views on that response. So I'll cover off briefly some information on the cost of living impact that's having in the Vale of Glamorgan, some previous work that's been underway to support people accessing food, some details of the various grant streams that we're managing and the impact that's having, an overview of our Croeso Cynnes warm welcome programme, as well as council food projects and the wider support, some of the information that Elizabeth was just describing, amongst others, and then finally the Audit Wales national study. So committee members will be very aware of the economic challenges facing the UK, Wales and the Vale of Glamorgan. We referenced that in a report to you as a committee recently as part of our budget setting process. But we've seen over the last couple of years how this is impacting our residents in the Vale of Glamorgan, and members have seen community impact assessments as a result of COVID, previously in 2020 and then the spring of 2021, as well as the recent wellbeing assessment by the Public Services Board. And specifically, it's expected that food insecurity is going to be further exacerbated by the cost of living crisis. We provide members with information on a variety of different impacts on a regular basis, including the economic impact assessments that we undertake. And we work to support as an organisation a range of different food support organisations. There are about 11 of them in the Vale of Glamorgan, which provide a range of different initiatives. Some pay-as-you-can models, the big box voids that operate from schools predominantly, as well as the Vale Food Bank, which provides crucial crisis support. In the previous financial year, we had funding of just under £100,000 via Welsh Government and the WLGA. That was in a couple of different funds, and that allowed us to provide support to organisations, including schools, the Penarth Food Pod, which is run by our housing team, as well as the food bank. And we also created and distributed over 1,200 essential food and hygiene support parcels, and that was done in collaboration with all council departments, as well as our partners, including Pobl, Hafod, Atalifro and the Woolwich as well. So this report then builds on that work, Chair. In the spring of 2022, I brought together a cross-departmental cost of living group. We were concerned that we wanted to make sure that the maximum value was being delivered as a result of our efforts. And that's allowed us to strategically shape our response to the crisis. And we've reflected this on the Council's risk register in the recent months. Committee will be aware that Cabinet approved proposals for the Welsh Government Cost of Living Scheme in 2022. That was made up of two elements. The mandatory element that made £150 available to all Band A to D council taxpayers, as well as those who were in receipt of council tax reduction. And there was a second locally designed element, the discretionary scheme, which was targeted at those who'd potentially fallen through the gaps of the mandatory scheme, as well as those most impacted by the crisis. And over 36,000 of our households here in the Vale of Glamorgan have been supported through that cost of living scheme. And we're also now processing the £200 payments for the winter fuel scheme on behalf of Welsh Government. And that will reach about 9,500 applicants as well. So the report itself provides you with an overview of some of the current funding streams that we're managing. With your permission, Chair, I'll ask Mark in Democratic Services to circulate to committee the most recent up-to-date figures. But in total, we've received £166,000 in these additional funds, and we've committed just under 159,000 of those now. That excludes £97,000, which is due to be forthcoming from Welsh Government to support food partnerships in the very near future. And that's allowed us to support a range of different local organisations, some in the purchase of additional stock. We've seen certainly the food banks reporting a decrease in donations, so we've been able to supplement that. We've also been able to help them to establish new pop-up food banks. There's one in Golau Caredig, which is a building opposite the civic offices in Barry, which is operating on a Wednesday, operated by Havod in partnership with Trussell and supported by the Council and Citizens Advice Bureau. We've also been able to support a range of schools, the Pencoitra cluster, to operate an increase in their community cooking workshops, as well as other projects. So a significant amount of funding, but going to reach a significant number of people each week as well. The report then moves on to talk about the Warm Welcome project, and that's about setting up a network of spaces across the county where a warm welcome awaits anybody who wants it. A variety of different activities in a sociable location with free refreshments and access to support and advice. And there are 33 of those which are operating across the Vale of Glamorgan now. And you can see details of that on our Warm Welcome webpage, which has been launched on the council's website. And that's got an interactive map which allows you to search for a location that is close by, and gives you all of the information about the operating hours and what's available at those locations. The report also describes, Chair, some of the food access projects that the council is involved in. I mentioned the Penarth food pod that's been set up by the housing department. That's being used by approximately 75 people on a weekly basis. And we've also made significant progress within Llantwit Major, where the council, working with our partners, notably GBS and others, have managed to secure just under £100,000 of National Lottery People and Places funding. And what that's allowed us to do is expand the offer that's available at the CF61 Community Centre to create a more than food hub, which is providing wraparound support, advice and signposting alongside GBS's food pantry, the St Athan Clothes Bank, and a chatty cafe as well. Elizabeth was describing the need to provide a range of different information about what support is available. And the report that Cabinet considered shows the cost of living support web pages that the council's website is now displaying. That gives access to a range of both council services, but also the services and support from wider organisations. And we're promoting that really widely through social media, our staff that come into contact with residents on a regular basis, and also through things like regular press releases and information that is going to the warm spaces as well. well. We're conscious that we need to provide support to our internal staff as well. That information is published on the StaffNet, which is available to all council staff. We ran a cost of living seminar for colleagues in November. And we're also, as you're aware as a committee, we've signed up to paying the real living wage pay rate for our colleagues as well. We continue as a cost of living working group to meet, and that's a really important way of coordinating the activity that is underway. And I mentioned earlier, Chair, that Audit Wales have produced a report called Time for Change, Poverty in Wales. And that was published in November of 2022, exploring the challenge of poverty in Wales. And it makes a series of recommendations for local authorities. They're around local strategies, targets and performance, as well as leadership on this agenda. Experience mapping to create inclusive services for people who are living in poverty. Some recommendations around the way that we share information, so a single web page for people seeking help, as well as how we design and deliver our services and make sure that information is accessible to people. And finally, making sure that everything that we do complies with the socioeconomic duty. As committee will be aware, when we receive a report from Audit Wales, whether it's a local or a national study, and they make recommendations, we always report that report to the relevant scrutiny committee alongside our proposed response to the recommendations. And at Appendix 1 of the Cabinet report, there's a management plan which sets out the actions that we intend to take. It allocates a responsible officer and a due date for delivering that activity. And we're particularly interested if committee have any comments to make on the proposed actions in response to that Audit Wales work. Any of your comments would be referred on to the Governance and Audit Committee for their consideration, alongside the views of Corporate Performance and Resources members. And once Governance and Audit Committee have considered the report, they will refer it back on to Cabinet. So that's the really quick whistle-stop tour through the reference, Chair. Obviously happy to take any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Tom. That was very, very informative. In the agenda conference, I did have some questions that were answered. So I will now open the floor to my colleagues. And the first person up would be Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom, for the detailed presentation. It's a question in relation to the warm basis scheme, which I do think is a fantastic initiative, and it's something I inquired about a few months before it actually came forward, and I raised it with the Chief Executive at the time, and I'm grateful to the Council for bringing this scheme forward. It's just that I don't really want to say a concern, because I appreciate that the Council does have limitations as to what it can do and the services that it provides. But from my sort of engagement with it to date, it does seem to be very much reliant upon existing groups or organisations being able to provide the service, and then there sort of being a bank of money available for them to bid on. Now, in some communities, it may well be the case that there isn't a viable group available that can simply take that on. I mean, I know if there's a library somewhere, for example, that's operational, it's relatively easy to designate that as a warm space and then maybe provide it with a bit more additional resource from the scheme to cover the costs of doing so. But in communities where that isn't the case, and I would include my own ward of Landock in that, because it is a much smaller community with fewer services. Have there been any discussions inside the council about how we can help make it easier to establish a warm space in those communities so that they don't get left behind?
Thank you, Councillor Carroll, and you're right. Initially, the approach has very much been to look to support and supplement existing provision, and I think the rationale, I know the rationale for that has been so that we can get these up and running really quickly, based on those established things. We've been really pleased to have lots of people come forward with their ideas and interest, and we're trying to make a relatively limited amount of money go as far as we possibly can. So we're seeing that that happen in a range of different ways. So where we've got people who are interested, but they might want connections to a community centre, for example, we're happy to try and bring those people together to try and support those things. So absolutely, if there's interest within Clandoc, and that we can have a conversation about how we could potentially look to build on that, I'd be absolutely happy to get the team to be in contact with you, no problem at all.
Okay, Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you for the report. It's it's awful that we have to have sort of the warm spaces in the first place, but I'm so glad that the Vale of Glamorgan Council is actually sort of taking this forward. Obviously it's relatively new that this has sort of been put into place, but I just wondered over time whether we'll have sort of stats to say how well the service is used, and sort of the sort of demographic makeup of the people who are needing to use the warm spaces and things like that. So you might not have those sort of that information at the moment, but I just wondered over time whether we would have that. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Yes, absolutely. We are asking for each of the warm spaces to collect some information for us, relatively light touch, so that we're not adding lots of bureaucracy to what is often volunteers. But we are asking certainly for numbers of people who are accessing. In terms of demographics, we probably won't have so much detail. My cat is doing a very similar thing across my lap at the moment, Councillor. But so we won't necessarily have detailed demographic information, but we certainly will have information about the numbers of people that are coming through those projects. Some of the larger projects as well are collecting case study information, which we're finding really useful. So I mentioned the pop-up food bank at Golau Caredig that Hafod are operating. Now, that's a really interesting partnership with Trussell, as well as Citizens Advice, as well as Hafod themselves. We're providing the funding that supports free street food on a Wednesday evening there. And what that's allowing us to do is see the different types of people who are accessing the support, and also learning then from those people what other information might be available and what might best support them. So we'll have a series of metrics, but also some case studies to share in the future.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Campbell.
Hiya. It's fantastic to hear about like all the finances and all the stuff that's going into all the food and everything like that. But we kind of don't get anything like that out here in Ruth. So we don't have like a food bank, or we don't even have a community food bank out here. So before Christmas we did a community food share, because obviously with the cost of living crisis and things like that, I was aware that there was potentially people who weren't going to have food over Christmas. We managed to support 27 people and families that didn't have food over Christmas, just from community donations. So there is a need out here for things like that. It's basically just to kind of echo Councillor Carroll's point as well, is like, because we don't have, we don't have a community council, we don't potentially have any strong community groups out here. I just don't want to be forgotten about. So how do we access like support and things out here for things like that? Like, you've spoken about Harvard and JVS and community groups and Trussell that run things in certain areas. So how do we access those things, Tom?
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. In terms of access to crisis food support for people, Trussell's and the Vale Food Bank do operate across the county, so that would be available for our residents who are living in Roos. I'd be really happy to have a conversation with you, Councillor, about what we could do potentially within Roos. I know we've only got one warm space at the moment listed, for example, within that particular part of the county. So perhaps if I can get in touch with you in the next couple of days and we can have a chat about what your local knowledge is telling you on the ground, and we can see then how we could potentially support that as well going forward.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, Councillor Morgan.
Here I am. Can you hear me? I hope so. Thank you very much, Tom, for the presentation. Two points to raise, really. One is the warm spaces is a tremendous initiative, and we do have one out in my ward in Pendoilin already, and I've looked at your interactive map, which is very useful. My concern, though, is the information about this is available online, but there are older people, vulnerable people who don't necessarily have online facilities, and also those who might be a little bit shy about turning up in a warm place when it's really somewhere that they need to be. So is there a way that we can reach out to people in our communities to tell them that there's a warm place and that everybody is welcome? And then just thinking ahead, which is something that I always try to do, in a few months, things hopefully will get a bit warmer. And so we might not need the warm places, but we still need the community places. And can we perhaps carry this forward to encourage those in our communities, I'm not saying the elderly, but the lonely, the people who don't have day-to-day contact with family members and friends and stuff, that there is somewhere that they can go on a regular basis to meet people without feeling that they are, pushing their way in. We speak in a world now where gradually our country pubs are disappearing, and so it'd be nice if there's somewhere that people can go. So that's just perhaps not something for this report, but something to look forward to the future, to encourage and support people who might be older, might be lonely, to know that there's someone in the community that they're welcome. So those are my points, not really questions, but points, if you like.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. I think the point around how do we make sure that the information gets out to as many people as possible is a really important one, and it's the reason for not relying entirely on digital means to do that. I was pleased that the team were out today delivering information leaflets, posters, and banners out to the existing warm spaces for them to use to distribute in local community areas, and certainly something that I'll ask them to give some thought to in terms of how we can make sure that message is relayed as wide as possible. And it's very much the reason for calling the scheme a warm welcome. It's incredibly depressing to think that we have to establish places that are warm banks, and we don't use that terminology. This is about a positive experience where people can come together. And definitely, it's food for thought now in how we build on the legacy of this work. We've seen fantastic community initiatives through COVID and now the cost of living crisis. And there's some really exciting work going on in Lantwick Major around a social isolation project, which we're running with GBS and Age Connects to do exactly that. So there's seeds of it, and I think we definitely need to give some attention in the coming months to how we can support that going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson, I know you are waiting. I would like to ask committee. One, are there any other members of the committee who would like to speak on this? And two, are committee happy for me to bring Councillor Wilson in?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. I don't see anyone dissenting. So Councillor Wilson, would you like to come in?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for giving me a bit of time to mention a couple of points. I think the Warm Spaces is a great project that the Vale is doing, and I think it's very much needed. I think obviously some people feel that they don't need to go And I would say to people is for lots of reasons they should go, for not just in order to keep warm, although that's maybe the fundamental reason, but also it helps people in terms of socializing with other people. And I think for lots of people, that's one of the main purposes of going to such a place, to meet other people and to have discussions and to have a cup of tea and maybe have some soup if you can, and just join in any sort of group activities. A lot of these warm spaces who do have group activities. And that's my first point. The second point, of course, is that one of the jobs that I'm responsible for, as you probably know, Councillor Collins, is that I'm responsible for repairs in the Vale Glamorgan in terms of housing. So people got council properties, and say, for instance, they got a building where there's clearly, you know, issues with heating, in the sense that the heat is not working properly, or that perhaps there's an awful lot of excess ventilation that needs to be looked at. Please do not hesitate but to contact the Vale using 01446 700 111 or C1V, or even your local councillor or whatever. Please do so. You know, don't suffer. And also, if you've got heating systems that, you know, do need to be looked at, you know, that, for instance, you've got individual thermostats that don't quite work on and off very well, let us know. You know, because that's important as well. I don't want anyone to be in a situation where they have to literally turn off the heating. Also, we've got money advice services as well involved, and that can help. So, you know, the important thing is let us know and we can help. You know, what we want is people to engage in the process, and if they need that help before it's too late. What we don't want, and as we can see at the moment, you know, the NHS in the UK is in crisis. No one can doubt that one way or the other. We've got lots of people who are suffering. We don't want people to suffer because they can't afford to turn on the heating. And it's important that people do let us know, and I'm sure we can be of help. So thank you very much, and thank you for having my indulgence to speak here, Councillor Collins. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Mark. Okay, Tom, before you go, I just want to build on the point that Councillor Morgan raised. We've had quite a while in lockdown during COVID, and as a result of that, isolation as an issue was really brought to the fore. I do believe that these warm welcomes are helping to tackle that issue, and we do need to do something going forward so that people do not go back to being isolated and alone again. Before COVID, it was kind of a hidden issue that we were sort of aware of, but nobody really talked about it much, and there wasn't as much publicly done about it. However, mental health well-being, social skills, all sorts of things like that, we do need to keep things like this going after the winter months if we can build on this somehow, it would be brilliant.
Absolutely, Chair, and I think you know, we've been very fortunate as a team that the contacts and relationships that we built up with those community groups during COVID have allowed us to reach back out to them and understand and support what they're looking to do in terms of cost of living. And absolutely, I think this is a demonstration of the kind of organisation that we want to be, is one that facilitates that real grassroots community level support for one another that we're seeing right across the county now.
Okay, thank you. Right, as this was a reference, there are no recommendations as such. Is committee happy to accept the report?
Yes, Chair.
Happy to accept.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
All right.
Just to double check, Chair.
Yeah.
Obviously, because there's a reference from committee in it on
Mhm.
if from cabinet, and if there were any comments to go back to audit to the governance and audit committee, etc. If there's not, we can simply note it. But I just want to make sure there isn't any recommendations or anything before we obviously close this matter.
That was the next thing I was going to ask, Mark.
No, I just
Yeah.
want to double check as well.
Okay. Does anybody have any, I know there were a few suggestions raised. Does anybody have any comments that they would like to have added to this report? Okay, Councillor Lovelock Edwards.
Chair, yeah, I think it might be useful to just highlight the sort of depth of conversation we've had in terms of we're looking as a committee to work with the council to expand the number of warm spaces available, and to look at new areas such as roofs and I forget what Councillor Morgan was. Is it in his area as well? That might be useful to show that it's not Barry focused and it is the whole of the Vale, because I know that Llantwit is doing some exciting work, but it would be good to sort of just, I don't know, we could demonstrate that as a recommendation, but it's something that we have put forward, is to ensure that the scheme is expanded as widely and as deeply as possible.
Okay, I am happy with that. Do committee agree?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, there you go, Mark. I think that's
Oh,
the only
that's
thing
great.
that we need to put in. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's fine, Chair.
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
committee.
very much for your time tonight, Tom.
you.
You may feel free to leave or stick around and listen to the next item. That is entirely up to you. But thank you for your time tonight, and thank you, team, for the work they've done on the report. Oh. Okay. So item number 6 is the update on the Community Safety Strategy Action Plan. I believe this is you, Mike, and Debbie as well. Welcome. I haven't seen you for a while. It's lovely to see you back, Debbie. Okay, if you'd like to go ahead, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it'll be a little bit of a double act this evening. Deb Gibbs, who many of you will know, is our Community Safety Manager and coordinates our community safety activity across the Vale. So what we'll do, first of all, I'll just give a little bit of background in terms of the Safer Vale partnership, and then Deb will concentrate on some of the activities and the actions that her team and some of the wider partnership have been undertaking over a period. I think it's fair to say that, you know, at the outset, and I know we've taken other reports to this committee, clearly a lot of the work of the community safety team has been undertaken during the period of COVID. And of course, there were a number of other priorities as a direct result of managing the council's response to some of the wider issues that COVID brought, particularly with the opening and closing of lockdowns and associated issues, which the council saw particularly in some of our resort areas over, you may recall, over the summer months and what have you. So I think it's just a testament really to the team about how much activity they have been progressing through the strategy, which Deb will cover shortly. In terms of the report before you, I think it's probably just, again, I know there are a number of new members on the committee, just to reflect on the partnership itself. So the Safer Vale partnership went through a period of review and restructure back in 2019. And as a result of which, and as part of that work, we developed a new community safety strategy and action plan. And that's what's before members today. The strategy itself was a 3-year strategy initially, and was looking primarily at a focus of priorities that were back in 2019. And as I've just alluded to, some of those issues, there were new issues and new priorities that the partnership have been dealing with over the last couple of years that perhaps hadn't been envisaged originally at that time. The partnership itself is made up of a variety of statutory organisations, as you can see before you in the report, including the Blue Light Services, but then also colleagues in the University Health Board, Probation Service, Area Planning, Cardiff Vale Area Planning Board, some housing providers, and also third sector representation. The strategy identified the work that we were doing back in 2019, identified 4 key strategic priority areas. And I think they're probably still valid today, although some of the actions may have changed during the period of time that we're talking about. And it's highlighted at 1.3 in the report the 4 priority areas. So prevent and reduce crime and disorder, and Deb will talk you through some of the activity that the team have been doing there. Engagement, and it was interesting to note some of the comments in both reports this evening around how do partnerships work with local communities, and as you can see, the increased awareness and feeling of belonging within communities. Safeguarding is the third priority, and of course, again, as has been discussed earlier this evening, the work that we do tends to be with the most vulnerable in our community, and I'm sure Deb and her team have been involved in discussing issues around illegal money laundering and other doorstep activity, both with SRS and also with Elizabeth. And finally, working together, and I think a reflection that as a local authority and as a council, it's not in our gift to be able to address all of the community safety issues and concerns, and that it is a partnership approach which enables us to respond in the way that we do. I think I'll leave it there for myself, Chair, and for those of you, Deb will introduce herself for those of you that do know Deb or don't know Deb, and we'll then take you through the action plan.
Okay, good evening all. Thank you for my invite this evening to go through this report. Just as a little bit of background for new members that may not know how community safety operates within the Vale of Glamorgan. We're a small team, local authority employed. Many of the posts are grant funded through Welsh Government grants that we have on an annual basis. We are co-located at Barry Police Station on Gladstone Road. So our offices are co-located with police officers. We share those offices so that it allows us to review overnight incidents that get reported and the best way forward and how we tackle those and put preventative measures in place to advise other people within the local authority that something may have happened overnight that may impact that service. So for example, if we have some antisocial behaviour in one of our parks or open spaces, we're able to notify that team straight away so that they can put measures in place to maybe go out and tidy that particular area, or to advise them if they've got any further information that would be helpful to us when we're looking to problem solve. We've been here for a number of years now. It's a very positive partnership working arrangement, and it does allow us to put that response in quite quickly. As Mike said, we have got the partnership delivery plan, and again, when it comes to reviewing where we are and being co-located with both the police colleagues and also probation that are based here, it does allow us to work quite quickly together without the need for meetings all the time or waiting on emails and responses. So within the delivery plan, we do review that delivery plan quite often. It's where we keep a track of how the partnership is performing, gaps in service. It is the first delivery plan that we've had in place. So I think over the last 3 years, the partnership has grown tremendously, and I've learned quite a lot in maybe agencies' sort of constraints, limitations. So not only does it keep us focused, but it also upskills us on other agencies' workings, which is always quite useful to have, especially when we're looking to problem solve areas. As you'll appreciate, community safety is quite a wide area and covers quite a lot of issues. So when we were looking at the delivery plan, we found that it would be helpful to sort of break it down into those 4 areas that Mike suggested, just to give us a focus of what we were looking to try to achieve. So as under prevent and reduce, things like antisocial behaviour, crime and disorder, county lines, violent crime would sort of fall into that area. engage. That would be about community cohesion and our activities and the engagement, which is fair to say that we probably have had difficulty over the last 3 years in achieving, and there may in the main are amber issues, and that's just because of the limitations that COVID have placed on us in terms of our plans. We've always been a team that have been out in the community and have gone into communities to discuss things. So obviously through COVID, we had difficulties with that. Obviously safeguarding, some members will be aware of the VOWDA SV agenda. That is one of our main agenda items within the community safety. The victims of crime and disorder, sort of trauma-informed practices, those types of things would come under that priority. And then working together, this is an area in which we all acknowledge that there's further work to do together, you know, in terms of trust, building trust, understanding people's limitations, and also being in that position where we can review things in cases where necessarily they haven't had the outcome that we would have wished for, and being in that position to go back and review cases to look for lessons learned and how we can improve as a partnership collectively going forward. So it's not about apportioning blame, it is about working together and look for those things going forward. So on the plan that we're presenting this evening, we have achieved 82% are shown as green, and that we've achieved that action, and you know, positive progress has been made. 18% of those actions have been attributed as amber, and as I mentioned earlier, many of those are around the engage element, and that's purely because of resources have been redirected into sort of prevent and reduce because of the impact of COVID on this particular team. There are plans going forward in the new strategy that we're actually writing now and we'll be consulting on in the future, that we do need to strengthen the identity of the Safer Fail partnership, and looking at new creative ways in which we can do that. So we're learning from those things that have not necessarily gone as expected for a variety of reasons, and they will feature quite heavily going forward. And we've had quite a few sessions with police comms teams and also the Vale of Glamorgan comms teams to look at ways in how we could enhance that. In terms of some specific positive good news out of those 4 priorities, we picked on some of the ones that we felt would be to show the different priority areas we do cover. So under the priority prevent and reduce crime and disorder, as Mike said, we do work quite closely with the area planning board. So that's the Cardiff and Vale board that looks at substance misuse issues across the area. And quite a lot of work has gone into recommissioning services to make it easier for people that are looking for that support to access that support. When we first started this piece of work some years ago, it was very, very difficult. There were waiting times, people didn't understand, and so on. So there's been a huge amount of work done on that, and that piece of work has been commissioned last year. So it's in that phase of transition into a new service. So we'll be hopeful to bring some of those outcomes from that service to scrutiny at a later date on how that transition has gone. One of the other areas under that delivery plan was to develop a prevent plan and a partnership plan for contest. So this is under the anti-terrorism strand that we have a statutory duty to prepare. And what we found during COVID was the volume of referrals into prevent showed a decline. And that was due to people engaging and people asking questions significantly reduced, which impacted on those referrals coming in. So we've met as a partnership. We're working very closely with the Home Office at the moment to develop a sort of a recovery plan of how we improve that situation. But we have got plans in place, you know, to do that, which is what we wanted to achieve in the first place. The other important thing from that is that the work of the Channel Panel, which is a multi-agency panel across Cardiff and the Vale to review prevent referrals, has taken place and you know, has received positive feedback from the Home Office in terms of that delivery. Mindful though that the numbers that have been referred to Channel Panel in the last 2 years have significantly declined. That isn't just a picture across Cardiff and the Vale, that is a national problem, and that is due to the impact of COVID. In terms of, if I pick some of the other successes that we've had, there have been, in the first 2 quarters of 2022-23, there were 1,175 antisocial behaviour incidents reported to the partnership. Out of those, it resulted in 725 referrals that the team have generated in the first 2 quarters of this year, where positive action or monitoring activity has taken place within those areas, you know, which is really, you know, quite a huge number that comes in that the team actually monitor and are aware of, and if they feel that the need is heightened there, they will take you know, further action. Some of you may see also the highlight report, the community safety highlight report that gets done on a monthly basis. That was an activity that we started at the beginning of COVID, and that was as a result of community members asking us that they wanted to know more information about community safety, and we looked to try to find a quick way of trying to provide information to community without it being too in detail or too much. Over the last 3 years, that highlight report has evolved and has expanded to include more information around topical issues that we're currently having in community safety. So there's been a feature about where people can access help for domestic abuse. There's been information from the fire service for people that may wish to have a home fire safety check and those types of things, so that we can sort of find an easy way to get that information out. That currently gets distributed to around 3,000 people a month, so it's got quite a big following for that piece of work. In terms of domestic abuse, we also, in the first 2 quarters, have reviewed 273 standard and medium domestic abuse referrals, which then obviously sort of would generate additional support or signposting to additional services for help and support. As I mentioned earlier, the work around Engage is probably one of the priorities that has not progressed as well as we would have hoped. However, there has been activity that has happened under this priority. We've re-established the community cohesion group to strengthen the agenda and the remit of the group. And from the presentation earlier, I think it's a really good opportunity to have the loan shark liaison group come and present that issue to that group, because they're quite proactive in some of the things that they do. So it's always looking for additional things to refer and you know, train people on. We've also looked to continue with our online presence through social media. We get quite a few private messages through that for help and support. We put a lot of community safety advice out on those channels around you know, things that you do to protect yourself in the summer. So you know, keep your windows shut if you're in your back garden and so on like that. So it's just some of those things that people may not necessarily think of, but could potentially be a hazard for them. In terms of the priority under safeguard, unfortunately and very sad, we have got a current domestic homicide review ongoing in the Vale of Glamorgan, and as I said, these reviews is where sadly somebody has died as a result of domestic abuse. These reviews take place. To date, it is only the second one that we've had in 10 years in the Vale of Glamorgan, but 2 is still too many. That review is ongoing at the moment. We hope to have a conclusion to that review in the summer, and these reviews are done to help agencies learn from some of the things that may not have necessarily gone well. Did we provide enough support? You know, was the information shared enough between agencies and so on? We've also looked at how we train our staff within domestic abuse, and one of the big things that we do for the Vouter SV is the national training framework. I think some of you may have had training previously on domestic abuse. So as a local authority, we've managed to train 2,317 individuals across the council at level 1 and 948 individuals to level 2. Just today, one of my colleagues was delivering training in Stanwell School to teachers on domestic abuse, so that in terms of the education sector, teachers are able to identify and able to have conversations with those children in those schools, to help provide support and advice to those that are actually experiencing domestic abuse. The other big thing under DV, which was under the priorities for work together, was that we are, as a partnership now, we are looking over consent. So if you are a victim of domestic abuse and you call the police, they will come, will assess that situation in terms of risk, but they will ask you, do you consent to pass on the information to people that can help you? This sometimes gets lost in that moment, and unfortunately some people do not give consent, even though it could open up avenues of support or information that they may not be aware of. So as a partnership now, we are reviewing consent with South Wales Police, and what that actually means and what the limitations are by not having consent. So it's you know, we are in a position where we can talk to agencies and challenge and look to achieve better things going forward. I think it's one of the main things within DHR reviews, is one of the lessons that we need to learn is a lot of the time is through lack of information sharing. So we're trying to address those issues through future work. In terms of another positive development we've had in community safety is around the CCTV and the upgrades that we've been able to do within this local authority. We are still in the midst of that upgrade. It's been a very fast-paced project for the local authority to do. We have started to receive monitoring reports now from Cardiff. So the service went operational in September of 2022, and from October of last year we've started to receive monitoring reports. We are still reviewing the format of that report and make sure we've got all the information that we need, and not all cameras have been fully upgraded at this point because we're still waiting for associated works to be completed. However, I would like to say that by early spring, all those cameras, the work should be completed and we should have a fully functioning operational CCTV system. However, I have to say, in terms of the travel distance within the last 12 months, that project has come such a long way in such a sort of short space of time. It is our intention as a partnership that we will be providing reports to Scrutiny on the development of CCTV and the outcomes that are achieved by that CCTV. We are looking to develop that into a CCTV operational group, again, to maximise the use of that system, share information in a more timely way to maximise those outcomes of having an effective CCTV system. We are looking to have that group set up in the spring, in alongside the completion of the upgrade, just so it makes it easier to sort of finish one element of the work off before we pick up the next one. The last thing I wanted to bring to the attention was that we were successful this last year in obtaining some funding from the Summer of Fun programme, and also the Police and Crime Commissioner to put on a pilot project for young people. So we had noticed within the team that we were starting to see clusters of antisocial behaviour taking place and escalating very quickly through young people. And we wanted to find a way where we could better engage with these young people and find out what the root causes of some of these issues were, instead of taking them through a process and not really understanding the reasons behind the ASB being committed. And we felt that it would be beneficial to have an external agency provide that service and that pilot service to give us some independence from it and have that fully evaluated. So that work is ongoing. We have commissioned St Giles Trust as the external provider to provide that work. It is due to come to an end. We started with Summer of Fun, and we managed to get match funding to take it through to the end of March 2023. As part of that, there will be an evaluation done on their findings. What were some of the issues? What were some of the concerns or the emerging issues that young people were telling them, just so that it can improve our strategy going forward and how we work with young people. So that is another ongoing development that we've got within Safe the Vale at the moment, and that is multi-agency. Police are involved, youth offending services are involved, just so that we can maximise the funding, the external funding that we've been able to guarantee for that project. So there's some of the benefits that we've had. As Mike said, we are into development at the moment for our strategy from April 2023. It has been agreed that it will be a 5-year strategy, just because I think time seems to go so quickly now, and we need to give ourselves a little bit extra time to develop some of these plans that we do have in place, and to monitor the outcomes of some of the big investments that we've done over the last 3 years as well, because with community safety sometimes you can't look at the outcomes for some time. Some things are not all about quick wins. It's about measuring the outcomes over quite a few years. So that was the decision made, to have a 5-year strategy, and then the delivery plan will be reviewed on an annual basis to make sure that it's still achieving what we would like it to achieve going forward. So I'm not sure if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Thank you, Mike. I do see we have a question from Councillor Aviett and Councillor Perks. But first of all, I just want to say one thing. I had questions in the agenda conference regarding the CCTV. The answer Mike gave me then, and the answer that you have given me, the information you provided now has given me a clear answer on that. Thank you very much. The reason I was asking is I know that in the summer, I know of an 11-year-old boy who in the summer was attacked in Pencoitry Park by a group of children between 14 and 17. Or I should say young adults between 14 and 17. The CCTV in the area was not operational at the time, and the only reason the police were able to get hold of any of these attackers and find out who they were was because people knew them and saw the police and told them. One was the brother of a friend of the child who got attacked. And so the friend told the father went to the police, and other people went to the police about it as well. Cases like this, it was it was relatively lucky that the 11-year-old boy who was attacked got off with relatively minor injuries. However, it could have been so much worse. So the importance of CCTV in areas like that and other areas in town, it cannot be overestimated. We do need to have the CCTV up and running as soon as possible in all areas. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I will bring Councillor Aviat in now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just two really quick questions. Oh, first of all, I would like to thank you on the report. I don't think you've left anything out. I was trying to find something and I couldn't find anything. I was thinking, oh, well, you're not helping enough men in domestic abuse, and I saw it. So you are. Basically, with the prevent agenda, have we had any incidents of hate crime due to people holding like far right views? Have we had any incidents like that in the Vale?
And what we've actually found. Sorry, would you like me to answer now?
Sorry, yeah, have we had any kind of incidents of hate crime due to people having them far right views? Do we take that as seriously as the terror related threats? Do we take that as seriously?
Yeah, so any incident that comes through and gets reported under that, we refer automatically into WEC2, which is the Wales Extreme Counter-Terrorism Specialised Team. We've got a very close relationship with them. Any incidents of graffiti that we have all fly posted now, so you might see some leaflets that are posted on lampposts in parks and open spaces now. We work with parks, they take us photos of these, and all of those images also get sent through to the counter-terrorism team, and we keep databases on all of this information so that we can track locations. You know, so there's quite a lot of work that goes into even one report of that coming in, just so that we can ensure that we are aware of our communities and what's going on in our communities and what we can do. So to answer your question, yes, we do get reports come through, and yes, they are taken very seriously, and quite a lot of work is done multi-agency to share that information internally as well as externally.
Oh, thank you, Deb. One more, if I may, Chair. On domestic abuse, can you just briefly explain what the perpetrator service is, please?
Okay, so that service is called the Drive service that we have. At present, it is only for high risk perpetrators of DV, and that's purely down to the limits of funding that we've got available to us. And what that team does is they'll work alongside the IDVA, which is there to support the victim in these cases, and the Drive team that will work with the perpetrator will work alongside the IDVA to maintain safety, because obviously that is the primary goal, is to keep everybody safe. And what they do is try to work together, whether or not they want to remain in a relationship or whether they've split, to try and challenge behaviours, to look at what maybe other associated needs may be needed. For example, is there an alcohol problem? You know, is there a problem around housing? You know, to try and unpick some of the issues that perpetrator may be experiencing, to try and put them on a different path, you know, than what they've been on. It has been quite successful in the Vale in terms of that service, and I think we're quite lucky, and we have progressed quite significantly, I think, in the last 3 years on our work with perpetrators. But as always, there is still more we can do, and there is more out there in terms of standard and medium perpetrators as well, and it's something that we do have on our agenda, but unfortunately it is something that comes down to funding.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Perks, if you'd like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Debbie, for that report. That was really comprehensive, and you know, for you, the small team that you have, the amount of work that you actually undertake is absolutely outstanding. So, you know, we do appreciate it on this committee, that the work that you do. So I would just wanted to ask around whether there's a prevalence of cuckooing in the Vale, and, you know, sort of how prevalent that is, and is it related to drug gangs, or is it other sort of, things where vulnerable people are being targeted?
We haven't had that much of it in the Vale, if I'm honest. However, it does happen. We have had a few cases last year where we were concerned that it could be happening. We haven't been in a position to prove that either way. However, we did work that it was happening and looked to put measures in place to support that victim. Some victims were supported through referrals to supporting people. We work with the housing provider and so on, just to make sure that we could put the correct safety plan and support plan in place for those individuals. I think we're quite mindful going forward, and in the current situation of the cost of living, that could well increase going forward. So it is on our agenda. It is something that especially the antisocial behavioural team do consider when they're reviewing cases. So whilst we haven't had that many confirmed cases, there have been occasions where we think it's happening, but the victim has not been sort of comfortable in giving those statements along that. But that's not to say that we haven't put that support in place that we would have anyway to make sure that we maintain safety and take action maybe in another route, that we can do that.
Thank you, Debbie.
Mike, were you wanting to come in on that?
Yes, it was just to add to Deb's comments and the question regarding cuckooing. We've also been providing staff awareness training, haven't we, Deb, to agencies and individuals, so that some of the signs, again, sort of harking back to the first report that you saw, unfortunately, people tend not to report these sort of things to statutory agencies for a variety of reasons that we're aware of. So I think it is probably important that community leaders, people within residents associations and other groups are also aware that where they do identify activity which they think is strange, that we don't associate, as Deb has mentioned, antisocial behaviour or groups and individuals causing nuisance, say, in a block of flats, primarily with that sort of issue. There could be underlying reasons as to why groups of people are congregating at certain properties, at certain flats. So make us aware of those, and we can obviously then investigate those and look to share the intelligence that may be available to partners. And also, as I say, then to approach that issue with perhaps with a different set of eyes, that it may not be the music being played loud and it's an antisocial behaviour issue based on that. It could be that a number of individuals are staying in that property and causing a lot of noise and issues associated. So just to reflect on that, really.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, Councillor Hanks, thank you for waiting. You can come in now.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Debbie. Just two comments, really. One on CCTV. I seem to have been following that up for an awfully long time, and hopefully now in the spring we will be getting there and we'll have something to be very proud of. And secondly, you work with a lot of partnerships, and regarding the antisocial behaviour, I just wondered if you work with Network Rail, because there does seem to be a lot of antisocial behaviour at railway stations and on the trains, and I don't see them mentioned at all. And I just wondered if that was something that you do anyway.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the areas that we've developed over the last 3 years. I think through COVID, especially when lockdown measures were in place, we work with British Transport Police that have got it's their role to manage the trains and the networks and the behaviour on the trains, and that wouldn't necessarily be maybe your local neighbourhood policing teams. It wouldn't be them, it would be a different team. So yes, to answer your question, we do work very closely with them, and I think it was COVID that pushed us into to working more closely with them. They do sit on our monthly meetings, our problem solving meetings for antisocial behaviour. So a representative will come from British Transport Police to look at that. But as always, if members have any concerns about activity or they've heard you know, information about what is happening on trains, let us know, and we would be happy to raise that on your behalf with British Transport Police. As with a lot of things related to antisocial behaviour, we struggle sometimes with people reporting. So that would be our thing, is we are looking with police, and I had a meeting earlier on with police colleagues about how we can make it easier for people to report things there and then, because I know that there's constant sort of concerns around the length of time that it can take, or the response rates aren't great and things like that. So we are aware of that, and we are actively looking at how we can improve that for people to report. But to answer your question, yes, we do work with British Transport Police on those issues. We are looking to strengthen that in the partnership going forward, and it will feature within the strategy going forward, just as a result of what we learned through COVID and how much activity does take place sometimes.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to speak on this item? I don't see any hands up, nobody raising their hand. Okay. Well, the recommendation for that item is that committee considers and notes the report. Are we happy to go with that recommendation?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you. We will note and consider that. We will note that report then. Thank you very much. All I can say is thank you, Debbie and Mike, for your appearance tonight, and a very, very, very educational and in-depth report. I look forward to hearing what happens next with it. So this is an ongoing organic situation, so we will see what happens next. We have no other items on the agenda tonight, so thank you all for attending, and the date of the next meeting is Wednesday the 8th of February. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Mark, you wanted me to stick behind?
Yeah,